Well, it's May the 8th. Do a little update on the situation. I guess today's topic is the economic news from yesterday and kind of what to think about the situation. We have basically the jobs number come at 266,000 jobs versus a million, which was estimated by the Wall Street people, which was a bit of a disappointment. And the unemployment rate actually ticked up 0.1%. And so that was kind of seen as basically a bit of a surprising negative news. And administrations kind of try to wave it and say there's no real problem, but I'll get into what the problem probably is here. Now, if you like these videos, remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel and give me a like. That'll be helpful, and I appreciate any comments you have. Okay, so the basic idea here is that the unemployment rate itself wouldn't necessarily be a bad number, because as more people enter the job market, that you could have a higher number of people available to work, and yet they may not be able to find a job would be one possibility. But it's a tenth, so that's kind of nominal. But the fact that they're way under their expectations on job creation is pretty major. And what seems to be going on here is that you have a situation it's largely being driven by the unemployment benefits that have been tacked on. The Democrats went and extended these supplemental unemployment benefits, which were pretty substantial. I believe it's up to about $300 a week, I believe. Dollars a week, in addition to whatever the state benefit was before that, which that varies from state to state. So effectively what you'll have is that the minimum wage jobs area, particularly the service industries and stuff like that, you'll have a situation where a lot of people simply make more money staying unemployed than going back to work. And so as a result, they just sort of wait around and don't actually go back to work. Now, I don't know exactly. It's been a long time since I only have had one experience with that system, and I'm not sure exactly how it works nowadays. When I was in it, there was a requirement that you look for work, and submit a card every week that you're doing that. I'm not sure, do they do that anymore or not. But at any rate, apparently these people are managing to stay out of work, and I notice this in reality because you'll see the fast foods are often understaffed. Where I get my hair cut, the people that were there are all gone, and they seem to be understaffed now with new people who, let's just say, not to knock them, but maybe not quite as skilled as the ones that were there before. I mean, and that sort of thing. So it looks like until these benefits end, you're going to have a continual problem of high unemployment, just because there's not a lot of motivation to get employed if you're not making above a certain threshold of income. Now, if you're in the higher income group, particularly skilled labor, union labor, when they're recalled, they'll want to go back to maintain their seniority, and because they'll be paid fairly more than these unemployment benefits. But so that's the problem that the administration has got itself into, and we'll see how that pans out in the days ahead. It's going to be pretty bad for small business, at least to September, I think. There could be some relief because of the graduating, the end of school session. I mean, really, it's across the board. If people are out of school, whether they might be looking for summer work, and that'll bring people into the workforce that may be able to take up some of those positions that the small businesses are looking to fill, and so forth. I've noticed that Walmart, for example, has gone to much greater automation as their solution. While they've increased their wages, they have a lot less checkout clerks, for instance. So, and it's now automatic, you do it yourself stuff, basically, with a few people around to assist you if you have trouble. So that's kind of the model that they're going to. You're seeing that in the supermarket as well. So we'll probably, so the way, this whole thing, like I've said all along, increase the minimum wages, and what you do, you have less workers. They get replaced by automation. In some cases, they probably get replaced overseas. So on the economy in general, I think we're seeing a fair amount of inflation at the moment. Things like lumber and gasoline prices are up, and a variety of things. Copper's increasing, silver, so forth. A lot of different items. I hear that things like toilet paper's prices will be going up and all this. And essentially, I think right now what might be going on at the moment may be just the fact that in many areas, like the lumber, there was probably a reduced demand for a period of time and at the same time reduced production. So the inventories weren't built up, and then all of a sudden, now with things opening up again, the demand has gone up. And as the demand goes up, the remaining inventories are quickly depleted, and now you end up with increased prices. Now, there should be a fairly rapid rush to fill the demand for these things as production goes up, and one would expect that it will pop back, it'll finally taper back down again at the end of that process, because that's kind of a supply-demand thing. The other type of inflation that we're worried about, though, and this is a longer-term problem, is all the loose money floating around. Essentially, the Fed has been and the government have been putting large amounts of money. It's been basically created out of thin air to some extent into the economy. Now, that's been doing things like supporting stock market, for instance, which went up in spite of the news yesterday. But on the long run, it poses an inflationary threat, I believe, because effectively we're getting in a position where you'll have a lot of money out there, and the amount of goods will not increase proportionate to the money. So if you have more money and a lot more money and only a little bit more goods and services, what you'll end up with is the goods and services will end up costing more. That's the way these things work out. And of course, the other problem is if inflation hits, what will we do about it? Since the government has saddled itself with so much debt in recent years, I mean, seriously, in the last decade, I guess you'd have to say that, well, decade, say 12 years or so, going back to the crisis of 2008, you pretty much have about tripled the national debt, or you will have tripled it by the time you spend the money that's currently being appropriated. And so that is an amazing situation. And of course, the way you generally fight inflation is to increase interest rates for the Federal Reserve. When you increase interest rates, the debt increases proportionally, because now you're getting 3 times as much money, that will have to be paid to pay the interest. And here's the other problem. Increasingly, ever since going back to the Clinton years, the government has focused more and more on funding its national debt with short-term bonds and securities. So instead of taking advantage of the low interest rates, and trying to sell out more high, 30-year securities, long-term financing, they for years have been doing a lot of short-term financing, and the result is that means that part of the national debt will react the fastest when the interest rates go up. So then it gets a question, does the Fed dare to increase interest rates? Or because of what it will do to the national debt, which will then compound within itself. So this is a rather serious risk to the country, and I would basically rate all the people managing the U.S. economy not very good grades, really. The problem is that when the Republicans are in, they're afraid to really crack down on the spending, because if they do, they'll probably just get voted out of office. And the Democrats actually want to do the spending, so they do even more of it. So the result is it's hard to manage this thing in practice, because you have people who are trying to protect their political futures, naturally, what they're supposed to do, are making decisions that fundamentally are bad because they have a short-term positive effect. It'd be sort of like you had children as the voters, and giving out candy was your opportunity. That the more candy you gave out, the better votes you got. So you say, well, kids, all that candy isn't good for you. We're going to cut back on the candy, and then they vote against you and vote for the people that will give them more candy. See, that's fundamentally the problem we have in the economy here. And ultimately, in the long run, who knows? What we do see is a lot of wealthy people moving into the cryptocurrencies now, which have gone up tremendously in price. And of course, the only claim to fame is that the cryptocurrencies are defined in a way in which they can't inflate them by simply, well, there's a finite amount that can be mined in each cryptocurrency. That's the whole concept of it. And so, since there can be only so much Bitcoin ever mined, effectively, you get the point. I suspect with Bitcoin, I'm not sure if anybody's even quote mining it, which is basically running some kind of computer algorithm, as I understand it. But the point, the newer ones, I suppose people are still mining. But the point is, when you reach that finite limit, then you actually have a finite amount of something. So the more people want to get into it, it gives it a value. Of course, if people want to get out of it, it loses its value. So, and then the government's regulation on this subject is still developing. I understand now they're trying to say that if you buy something with a cryptocurrency, effectively that's going to be treated as a capital sale when you buy something. Whereas normally when you buy something with $1, that's not considered to be a capital sale of $1. Of course, that's our currency. And I have no experience with dealing in foreign currencies, so I don't know if you put a bunch of money into a European bank in euros at one time, and let's say hypothetically the euro increased in value by 10%, and then you bought something in Europe with your euros, is that considered to be a capital transaction that you need to pay capital gains on the 10%? That I don't know because I have zero experience with doing it, so I don't know. But that's something but apparently they're trying to impose a rule like that on buying things with cryptocurrencies, as I understand it. I don't know if that's been effectively done yet, but that's a proposal status. It sounded more like a proposal than a current thing, but what it really may be is the interpretation of law that the DOJ is trying to enforce, and of course then we'll have to have the test cases in court and see how that plays out. The courts will probably be favorable to the DOJ on that because after all they are part of the government and they want the money too, right? Well, at any rate, so that's my view on the economy, is that I think they're going to have an ongoing problem getting small businesses up and running. And one might argue maybe the Democrats don't want small businesses up and running. Maybe they consider them to be entrepreneurial and inherently Republican, and they'd like to crush them. And that could be what's really going on here. I think a lot of people will probably agree with that. So anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, and that'll be all for today.